Welcome to the November 20th Growth Rings Learning event on Wise Leadership with Cindy Wilcox. I'm Bev Lutz. I'm a former board member. I'm also a founder of the Center for Coaching and Organizations, a 501c3 nonprofit. I'm going to go straight to introducing our guest today because I'm thrilled that she's here. I felt very smug about scoring this speaker today, and some of you have heard her before and been with her, so you know how rich this can be. I first met Cindy decades ago through our local Minnesota Facilitators Network, and our paths have crossed in different ways as she's gone from being an independent to being an internal, to being an external again, to being a this, to being a that. She spent stints championing coaching within Target and Cargill as practice leader. She's also worked with the Center for Spirituality and Healing. Somewhere along the way, she gained a PhD in learning and development. And she is what I consider to be a quintessential lifelong learning. And I mean a dive deep and dive broad lifelong learner. Lately, what she's also been doing is the lifelong learning and navigating both the heaven and the hell of parenting twins in middle school. What I love that she said to me recently is that the way you could kind of sum up what she's up to is that she is constantly reinventing her relationship with life itself. So I will welcome Cindy and her wisdom to kick us off. Cindy.
Wonderful. So should I go ahead and share screen now, Bev? I
If you're
guess
ready to start,
yeah,
go for it.
before I do that, I'll just do one minor correction because it's important to me. My PhD was in leadership and cultural systems. So it
Ah,
wasn't
that's
actually
right.
food and development.
Thank
And
you.
it's because, and this is important to me because I have had a lifelong passion for leadership. And I have worked in leadership development in every sector. I started in international development, doing civic and community leadership, worked with all of our reservation communities and tribes in Minnesota around community leadership, which is a very interesting path because they have both the imposed leadership structures as well as the spirit-based leadership path that is more traditional. And I've done corporate, I've done nonprofit. So anyway, it's been quite a journey, and it's interesting that, well, I'm gonna just, you know what? I've been experimenting with writing. How many of you play with writing stuff once here and there, once in a while? I'm kind of new to it because I am a single parent of middle school twins. Middle school is and has been hell and continues to be hell. And it does make you stronger. So we're all going with that. Um, but anyway, so I haven't had a lot of time for writing, but I decided for this, I was going to write a brief story to say why and how I got involved in exploring wisdom and leadership. So I'm going to start by reading that before I jump in to the presentation. So here goes. I haven't even read it again since I wrote it. So this whole thing today is a big experiment. I also have never presented this model I just created on wisdom and leadership. So you guys are the very first. And that's why last thing I want to say before I read the story is please jump in and ask questions. We're a nice small group, so we can do that easily. And I'd love it to be a dialogue because I am showing you some new material and seeing, how does that play? How does that play in the world? So here's my story. This is so funny. I literally haven't read it a second time. Um, I titled it Stepping into Elderhood, A Return to Wise Leading, is what I called it. Like many leaders shaped by modern systems, I was deeply schooled in productivity. I was trained to lead with logic, to set aside my emotions, to ignore my body's signals, unless, of course, they interfered with performance. But I was also raised with a really strong sense of service to this world, to others, to something larger than myself. And I think it's that orientation that really has saved me. When I left my last role, as Jen knows well, I was completely burnt out. It was at the tail end of COVID. I was, running the executive coaching function at Target Corporation while homeschooling then first graders. So they were sitting in the corner of my office here. They'd never worked on a computer. They didn't know what a computer was. And I was, teaching them at home while also watching my father, who had just gone into a memory care facility. He was in a group, kind of a wing with 21 people, and 16 of them died within 3 weeks after it got hit by COVID. He was one of two who got COVID and tested negative, but then died a couple months later because it had damaged his lungs. And this is the story of my burnout. I don't think you recover from something like that. Seeing that many deaths in a short period of time, trying to communicate with, a father who had advanced dementia, and they're surrounding him in his room in hazmat suits, pointing at an iPad, trying to get him to talk to us outside the window. He doesn't know what an iPad is. It still sits with me, that image does. We were also then in in the executive coaching area. I was launching leading through crisis programs, and our enrollments tripled overnight. But of course, there was no additional support plan for any of that. Everyone was in crisis, right? So by the time I stepped away and just said, I can't do this, I need a break, I not only had lost my energy, but I found that I had lost my passion for leadership. I noticed I've stopped reading my story and I'm just telling you because I did write it down. And I started asking myself two questions. What orients you when the ego of your career path no longer does? And who are you when you're not producing and you're not performing? Who am I now? So that kind of became a threshold for me. It started an inquiry into, the mystification I had around no longer holding a passion for leadership, which I had been passionate about my entire life. And it was an invitation to, examining it and looking at it in a whole new way. So slowly, as I kind of looked at elderhood, I'm at a different place in life. I'm not going to do any more jobs. That's done. Um, I slowly came back to leadership, but not as it was, not as how I had been practicing it, but as I thought it could be. So there you go. And that meant a leadership that was rooted in wisdom, not achievement, and a leadership that was grounded in right relationship with each other and, as Bev said, life itself, not productivity, and a leadership that was worthy of the name elder, which I hope we all grow into that at some point in life. So, this is kind of an exploration today around what would it look like if more leaders lived and led from that space. What a question. So that's my story. What do you think? You guys, seriously, it's a first telling, so I'm feeling a little vulnerable, but not too bad. All right, Bev, I'm going to launch our slides here, and we will look at this topic. All righty, give me a second. There's probably oh my gosh, how did that pop up again? And we will go to the
And you're getting some encore, wonderful and powerful. I wish I wrote your quote about your ego not being defined by performance. Thanks for sharing your story. You're getting love bombed, dear.
Oh my gosh, I like that. That felt good. Thanks for reading those, Bev. Okay, so I will give you one more thing before we jump in. I did how can I say that? Last year, I was recruited by the Carlson Executive Education to partner around developing a new program that was most fundamentally about purpose, but they wanted to include a segment on leadership. So I did at that time explore the science of, on wisdom and leadership. I explored the science of wisdom as it pertained to leadership. So some of what I'm going to share today showed up in that program. Interestingly, this year, They want me to expand the whole thing, partner with an AI expert, and look at that contrast between AI and what it is doing to our world, our life, our occupations, and then hold as we explore, more deeply what it means to be human in the face of AI, then we're going to start looking at wisdom and the practice of wisdom. So that's to come, and I expect that to be super fun. So I read my story. What we're going to do, and I better keep my phone next to me. I will also confess, you guys, my mother is in the hospital right now. So if you see me checking my phone, it's only for that reason. I need to stay in touch with what's happening and where they're moving her. So, and I also need to watch my time. So, so what we're going to explore is, why is this relevant now? I told you why it's relevant to me personally, but why is it relevant to the world is a question. Next, we'll look at, what is the science of wisdom? I haven't heard much about this. Are there people actually studying this, and what does it look like? And then I want to share my new model, the wisdom resonance framework, and get some feedback. See if it makes sense to anybody. I think it does. Bev liked it yesterday when I shared it. And then we'll look at application and coaching from wisdom. And I hope we'll have plenty of time toward the end so we can maybe even get in triads, or, well, how many do we have here, Bev? Six, nine. Anyway, Bev will figure it out. So perhaps we can get in, or with a small group, we could just have a small group discussion. So we'll see how much time we have at the end, because of course everything um, should be looked at with a practical lens too. All right. I think Bev put this in the notice about this particular Growth Rings event, and shared it earlier, the drowning in knowledge and starved for wisdom. I just want to start by asking you guys, how does this feel for you? How true does it feel for you? Do you have the drowning sense on a regular basis? What are you drowning in, and what are you starving for right now at this really chaotic juncture in life? Is anybody willing to share on that before we jump in?
Yeah, and feel free to take yourself off mute, or if you're just feeling that way today, throw it in the chat.
I'll say something. I'm drowning in written material. I get, all sorts of emails every single day, and they always have news and information about, my work and what I do, and sales for this, and give to the max day for that. There's so much information that just comes at me when I open my computer, let alone, if you can see my background, this is real, books and newspapers and magazines and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I will never, ever be able to look at every single email I get every day. So they just keep piling up and up and up. So I'm just drowning in that, and the only, I guess I'm not starved for time because I'm working less now, but um, I'm starved maybe for a feeling of completion about pulling things together into key messages. I guess I'm thinking out loud, so if that makes sense.
Mhm. Thank you. Anybody else? And you can work with either one. You can say what you're starved for right now, or what you're drowning in. Anyone else want to
I'll
share?
just, this is kind of answering your question. I've been thinking a lot lately. So this is more of like a negative frame. And so I'm excited to maybe reframe this as something I do want, which is probably more wisdom. But I've been thinking a lot lately about the lasting impact of bad leadership. And like, that's also for all of us to think, like for ourselves, like what if we have that impact on people, but also just like the lasting impact that can have. And so maybe that's what I'm starved for, is the wise leadership, or maybe I'm drowning in what can feel like at times like unclear or bad leadership. And so that's just what I'm wrestling with.
Mhm. You raised such an interesting question. I used to, when I was at the Center for Spirituality and Healing, we talked a lot about positivity, false positivity, worked with Barbara Fredrickson, who authored a lot of work on that. And I get challenged by that a lot because I sometimes, this is, like you said, that was a great call out for me, Susan, is that's kind of a negative framing. It's interesting to see what people do with that because to me, negative framing is a call to honesty and sometimes a wake up. And it's not worth anything if we don't find a way to move into it with, positive life force, right? So that's a great call out for us in this session. Thanks for that. I appreciated that. Yeah. Anyone else?
I'll just jump in and say that, yeah, I agree. There's a lot of noise right now, just noise. Like I feel like there's static on the channel. There's so much um, just distraction. And so I don't think I'm starved, but I'm always seeking like deep connection, real community, um, and just some of that wholeness that feels like our culture is ignoring right now.
Yep. I love that. I resonate with the community starved for depth, more depth, and depth in our relational connection too.
And I think Cindy, Jennifer's comment in the chat, I am
Mm.
finding within my client work, they're craving more processing, evaluating with a person. They may have used AI, but the processing with a human seems to be even more valid and valuable. And
Yeah.
I practice in the careers visibility space, she adds. And then again, it seems like the general quote unquote advice, which may come from social or AI, can't see the human nuances.
Yeah.
So again, a craving for the relational.
Yep. AI works in, the rational reason. Well, it works in a lot of spaces now, but it does not have access to the embodiment, the embodied sense, the felt sense that we as humans do. So that's quite an interesting distinction. Well, let's move on. I'm going to zoom past a few of these slides because this is nothing new, but it is interesting. I don't even hear people talking about this. You know how people used to talk about the industrial age and the information age and the knowledge, knowledge framing. And it seems to me we're in the AI and wisdom age because one can't live without the other successfully. Well, perhaps we could live successfully without AI, but I don't think AI is a future without us developing wisdom as a human species and having more focus on that. So that's also part of the why wisdom conversation. Um, in our this slide, I did a scan of the literature. These are some of the things that came out around why wisdom now. This was mentioned, information overload. Um, to me, it is that sifting through noise, it challenges me every single day. The rapid pace of change. I'm not going to read these because you can, but I love the call out around the importance, especially in the leadership field, around navigating change ethically. Do you want me to read them? Are some of you having trouble seeing them? No. Okay. Yeah. So, and that's part of what wisdom does is helps us keep, our North Star, our ethical orientation as we move through life. The global interconnectedness, the thing that stands out for me there is really understanding, the ripple effects and how rapidly, um, our actions ripple, information ripples, and it helps us really look at the long-term consequences on a global scale, which I find really important. Polarization and division. I would like to think that wisdom also fosters more patience, fosters bridge building, and kind of counters some of what I think what it says here, a prevailing, tribalism that's showing up in many ways across the globe. So it's a counter to a lot of the things that are occurring. And it also helps us stay focused on lasting value and contribution. I've said I've worked with a lot of Native communities and who think minimum a few generations ahead. 7 generations is what we've heard most often. But how do we make sure that our leadership is not focused on just this moment or this fiscal quarter, but on the impact, the true impact, the lasting impact on future generations? So those are some of the things that show up in the literature. I personally also really believe, one of the things that makes us distinctly human is we don't just function on our analytical nodes between our two ears. We have access to a heart that is a profound source of orientation and direction. And we have access to, the felt sense in our bodies, the embodiment that also leads us and informs us really in ways that simple and less simple analytical processes can't. So, for some reason, I felt a need to put this in here that as we look at wisdom in leadership, we have to honor the fact that it's our heart that can see rightly in things. And of course, our brains, our intellect, our reasoning ability can help us implement on them, but it is never the whole story. Um, One of the first things Bev asked me is, well, do you have a definition? Of course. No. It is important to define what we're talking about. This is the definition I created that relates to the model you will see later. And I am going to read this and ask you guys what questions you have about it, because it may be quite different than any definitions of wisdom you've seen. But for me, wisdom is that integration of our emotional clarity, rational discernment, and intuitive sensing. So I spoke a little bit about that, the felt sense in the body, held in alignment with a purpose that goes beyond the self. Questions, comments about this? There's a lot packed into a run-on sentence there.
And Cindy, why don't you read it one more time? Just let
Okay.
it sink in.
And if you don't have questions now, that's fine, because I will kind of take it apart and look at the pieces of this as we look at the model. Wisdom is the integration of emotional clarity, rational discernment, and intuitive sensing, all held in alignment with a purpose beyond the self. So you can mull that over.
And Jennifer adds in the chat that she loves the intuitive sensing and considers that the X factor.
Yep, it's a thing that is often left out, honestly, because it's harder for science to explain intuition, although there is a lot produced and written on that.
And
So,
I'll also read her comment that in purpose beyond self. Now, I'm not sure how she would say it, but I'll go, God, so good.
yeah,
I
I
was
know.
just gonna pop and say that too, the part about purpose, because when I think of wisdom, I think of the wise person on the hill and not the outward impact of that wisdom.
Yeah. It's interesting because, the word purpose has gotten us in a lot of trouble, I think, as in this country, we have a very, it's a less communal, more individualized way of looking at life. And so when people tend to think about purpose and write their individual purpose statement, unfortunately, it attaches a lot to the ego, and which is takes us in the opposite direction of, I think, where we really want to be in purpose beyond self. Purpose attached to the ego just stresses us out more. It's like, oh, how am I as one little person going to, have an impact or be remembered after I die or whatever it is. Purpose beyond self, on the other hand, fills us up. It gives us great meaning that is situated in the relational field. And that to me is the important difference there. So we'll look at
And
that. Yeah,
Cindy Lynn says, I'm curious about wisdom, including learning from experience, history, generational learning, bringing in what still shows up from the past.
that's probably why I wrote this. It's not just knowledge, though knowledge is a key ingredient. And it is, I like the word metabolize. It is metabolized learning, right? Where you have taken it, you've integrated it, you hopefully have run it through both your intellect, your emotional um, sense, your emotional response to it, and your intuitive knowing. So I do say here it's the practical application of that knowledge tempered by experience, empathy, reflection. And I think, I don't know if we were talking about this, Bev, but I used to do a lot of work training leaders who were going to be expats to work in a multinational in a country that was not their own. And we always talked about the fact that you can go live in Brazil for 4 years, but if you are not actively exploring the experience, um, reflecting on it, talking to people native to the country about how they are framing things or why the language works this way, or holding an empathy and curiosity during your experience, it will not turn into anything but an experience you had. And so that processing, reflecting, metabolizing is absolutely essential as well. So how's that? I just had that all teed up.
Thank you. Just right where my mind was going. Thanks.
Yeah, wonderful. All right, let's keep moving here. I want to share with you the best stuff I have found on the science. I have to move. I keep not being able to read my own slides because my picture of you, beautiful people, is in the wrong spot. Okay, so these are the six most commonly proposed subcomponents of wisdom. I do have a big bibliography of more sources that I read through, but the one I liked the most is what shows up at the bottom of these two slides. And it all falls into the neurobiology. There's a sub category of the research on this called the neurobiology of wisdom, which just seemed to be richer and more resonant for me. So that's where I drew this from. But the six commonly proposed subcomponents of wisdom are reflection and self-understanding. At least a couple of them here land solidly in the emotional intelligence kind of framing that we often work with as coaches. So clearly that has to be present. Second one, pragmatic knowledge of life, good judgment. That's kind of what we were just talking about. It's people who not only have a variety of experiences of life that is present to help them learn, grow, and develop, but they metabolize that knowledge. They metabolize those experiences into good judgment, common sense, because they have been in a reflective process. Um, I have a colleague and friend who keeps a wisdom journal to ensure that every day, every week, he is metabolizing his experiences and looking for what wisdom is coming from this. What would I call wisdom that is arising from these experiences? And he has years of these journals, and it's quite lovely and profound. That's something anyone can do.
And
But we,
actually, Cindy, that dovetails nicely with something Betsy had put in the chat a couple minutes ago, saying it also seems that wisdom moves at a pace that is slower and broader than other knowledge.
yeah, exactly. Because if we're just jumping from experience to experience to experience, we are not metabolizing, processing, reflecting, which is an essential part of wisdom. So wonderful. The third one I have on here is value, relativism, and tolerance. Um, this may be not a true statement, but in my world, uh, that is achieved through the second one that we just reviewed, if you start allowing life to be non-binary, not black and white, many shades of gray, which does happen. It takes me back, actually, I'll use this example. When I did work a lot on in the areas of cultural sensitivity, and I worked with the developmental model of intercultural sensitivity, often use the example of, how many kinds of wine are there? Well, someone who has not had much experience with wine maybe only has a glass of wine when they go to the certain Italian restaurant where they have a table red and a table white. And they will say, well, there's red and there's white. Okay, that's true, right? Doesn't necessarily reflect the very complex world of wine that connoisseurs enjoy. Then, if you go beyond that, if they, maybe have a little bit more experience with that, maybe go to a nicer restaurant that has a wine list and they find out, oh, the whites are a Pinot Grigio and a Sauvignon Blanc or whatever it might be. It starts to broaden out. The complexity starts taking shape, and they can't go back to saying there's red and there's white. It's just not possible. Then, if they travel a little, perhaps to Argentina, and get to visit some vineyards, and they're all Malbecs, and they're like, well, who else grows Malbecs? Nobody? No, and they start to understand what happens if a Malbec vine is transplanted to, Sonoma or or somewhere else, and how the climate conditions and the rain that season and the earth itself is creating variation in that variety. Anyway, that's relativism, and when applied to people, obviously it takes shape as we all understand that. So again, someone who has presented themselves with challenging experiences, reflected upon it, created new understandings, judgments, and continued expanding that is going to be probably more able to hold a wisdom approach. I just love that wine metaphor. I'm not a huge wine drinker, but it resonates for me. The fourth one is emotional stability and equanimity. That's another one I would say sits in emotional intelligence, as many coaches know it, but it is not easy to come by. Equanimity is a term that comes up in meditation and mindfulness practice a lot, and it's about the ability to hold balance. So you may get hit with, some kind of tidal wave emotion. Suppose you find out, Jen will relate to this, at Target, that there's a huge layoff coming, and you start seeing your friends get impacted, and you walk in and you're impacted. You get hit by a tidal wave of emotion. If you have trained yourself, skilled yourself, developed your own wisdom, you have a greater capacity to kind of balance that with other past experiences, other information coming in, maybe a better attunement to the emotional messaging you're creating in yourself, a stronger ability to perhaps calm the heightened reactivity in your body. That's part of wisdom. The fifth one, the ability to deal with uncertainty and ambiguity. It's a little bit related to the previous, because uncertainty and ambiguity, they say that uncertainty is harder to sit with and live with typically. This is through measures of, biometric measures and signals of stress in the body. It's harder to sit with uncertainty than the worst possible imagined outcome, because at least you know what it is now, right? So again, the uncertainty, ambiguity heightens our stress, heightens our reactivity. And if you have worked with your own wisdom capacities, you probably have a stronger ability to sit with that and not let it hijack you in the same way. And the last one is pro-social attitudes and behaviors. And that is just doing a little time check, that is the beyond self, right? The good beyond self. To me, that is by far the most important among these. Can it be wisdom? What do you guys think? Can it be wisdom if it does not include an orientation toward the good beyond self? And I know that may be weird phrasing for some of you. How do you roll that around a little bit? What do you think?
I'll come off mute so you don't have to read, Bev. Um, the moment you say wisdom, Cindy, the first thing I think of is sharing. Like wisdom feels to me, there's a social aspect to it of like it's not just about me knowing, but it's about that act of sharing. And so this pro-social attitudes and behaviors, I don't see a link of wisdom without some sort of community willingness to share because wisdom feels like generous too. Like, who am I to know something and why wouldn't, what's wise about just me knowing something? Why wouldn't I share that with whomever? So I like what
That
you,
actually made me almost feel, I feel like getting teary, Jen, hearing you say that. Because no, really, because it's so what I feel is so often lacking in, the situation that we're in this world right now. And that's what it's all about. That is absolutely what it's all
Mm.
about for all of us in all of our lives. Anyway, I love that. Thank you.
Cindy, Susan asks, how do you think about the intersection of these subcomponents of wisdom and neurodiversity?
Mm, that is a great question. I have not had a single thought on that so far. Let me see if I can conjure one. Uh,
And Susan, if you have thoughts, come on off
yeah,
mute and
exactly.
share
I
what's
know that's
percolating
coming
for
from
you.
somewhere.
Yeah,
But
I don't expect an answer. It's just what's coming up for me is that some of these subcomponents could be uniquely challenging for some folks. And so I don't know what that means. I don't know what I think about it, but I'm just thinking about, does everyone have access to this just fundamentally or not? I don't
I'm
know.
going to come back to that when I show you the model in a little bit.
Okay.
Okay. Because
Yeah.
the model is about the fact exactly what Jen was saying. We do not exist in isolation. We are in a relation.
Hello?
Hi, Melissa.
Whoop.
We are in a relational field, and we're also in what some people call universal field. It's the beyond self field. For some, it may be spirit. For some, it may be common good. For some, it may be divine mind. There are lots and lots of words for that. My sense, Susan, is that sometimes people who are neurodivergent have better access to that
Mm-hmm.
than we do. Those of us who are more used to just solving everything between our two ears, which can be a
Mm.
challenge for us. So that's my take on it, I guess, for now. For now.
Thanks.
Okay. All right. We're gonna go to, oh my gosh, all of a sudden my screen is frozen. Why? I do not know. Okay, there we go. That worked. So I want to show you this. I did not create this, but it was basically a lovely take on the six components and how to shape them into leadership, a leadership model itself. So we don't need to go into this in detail, but you see that all of those six components are reflected here. Starting on the right-hand side here, able to adopt multiple perspectives. Now I'm going to think of everything in terms of neurodivergent. There's probably better capacity there, honestly, in some cases. And that's the value relativism and tolerance. Second one, effectively navigating uncertainty and the limits of knowledge. The wisdom to understand there are limits to our knowledge, and then we have to move into different spaces, perhaps more intuitive or otherwise. The third one is one of those emotional social intelligence, managing one's emotions amidst challenging circumstances. It's the third facet of wisdom here. Fourth one, reflection and self-understanding. So the exploration, the self-reflection, the metabolizing of your life experience. Fourth or fifth is practical knowledge and life skills. Um, that tied to, yeah, the pragmatic knowledge of life was in the 6 components. And that is just, again, experience and application of that experience into something useful for others. And again, my favorite, of course, working towards a common good. So that's the way it was framed in this model. Um, but those were all of those 2 slides, as Bev had said to me the other day, well, those are the what of wisdom leadership, of wise leadership. But it doesn't tell you anything about how you get there. So because I've been in the field of leadership development, my interest always goes to, yeah, but how do you get there? What do you do? How do you develop wisdom in your leadership? Um, so I think I'll read this quickly. This relates to the definition of wisdom also, because people think about it differently. And we can say, oh, it's a philosophy. Is it a philosophy? Let's just do a head nod or a head shake. Is it a philosophy? Yeah, you're kind of getting some bobblehead movement here. Yeah, yeah. Well, sort of, because it gives you an orientation towards life, what we think the fundamental nature and point of life is. Is it an intention? For some, it can be part of an aim or a goal. And some people might say, well, you never really get truly wise, but I hold it as, something that orients me. Is it a skill? This is the one we hope it is, right? Because we want to be able to develop wisdom in ourselves and our clients. Is it a practice? Is it just something that's about practices you hold every day that naturally shift your way of being? I think it's,
And we,
yeah.
yeah, we have a few chats. Michael Chin saying it's part of, Carolyn saying it's a little bit of everything. And Susan, maybe our wisdom informs our philosophy.
Yeah. This alone, we could have a whole webinar and discussion on this slide, honestly. It's quite interesting if you like that kind of exploration. So all that to say that I do believe that there's skill related to it also. That's why I showed you the model on the previous slide. And so what I'd like to do next to give us a break from all this heady thinking stuff, exploration stuff we're doing, I'd love to take you guys through a meditation. It's part of a related to a practice that I do through the 9 bodies meditation. It's a form of insight meditation. And also, it'll give us kind of a nice break in the action to not think about wisdom, but actually feel into it a little bit. So I'm going to invite you all to, if you want to leave your camera on, you can turn it off. Doesn't matter, whatever makes you comfortable. And we're just going to take a little bit of time here. For me, when I meditate, and even when I coach, I always start with I have a candle sitting here. I don't know why. It helps me in some way. So let's go ahead and just breathe into our body right now. Sometimes when we think too much, we start building up tension. It can be right here in your forehead, or it could be anywhere. It could be in your feet. So just do a few deep breaths. Settle into your body. Allow yourself to feel the support of the chair you're sitting in. Maybe you're resting your arms somewhere. And sometimes it helps to put your hand on your heart and feel you supporting yourself by giving yourself time to reflect on something like wisdom. I notice when you breathe, if your breath is not reaching any parts of your body, just make sure you breathe into the top of your head, maybe down to your feet, into your toes or your fingers. Fill the top of your lungs till you feel energy throughout your body. And feel the joy of living in a body again. Now we're going to do what I call an arriving sequence. So I'm going to read this as written to make sure I don't miss anything here. Welcome. Arriving. Arriving. Yes, I want to be in touch with this moment so that I am present in my life. So I'm present to myself. So I'm present to others. Arriving where? Here. Arriving when? Now. Here. Now. Here. Now. Here. Now. I want to be in touch with this moment so that I am present to my life and present to others. There is this kind of joy when we start to feel present, one moment after another. It's a stream of moments, a stream of nowness. Here, now, here, now. If we're not really here and now, then we're just reacting. So when you feel the moment from this place, here, now, you may notice yourself becoming available to this moment. You may start to feel the moment. We have the availability of that felt sense, the touch and the smell, the sound. Could even be that sense of the qualities of our own thoughts. They may feel heavy or they may feel light. We're dropping out of our head and into embodiment where so much more is available to us. When this moment, here and now, is available to us, we get to create. We are no longer just reactive. We also have choice, so we become more skillful in our communications, in our self-reflection, in our understanding of ourselves and others. When we are at choice in this present moment, we find our mindfulness also is present within a value system because we have agency, we have choice, we are present, we are available, so we have choice as to how we respond in this moment. The thinking mind is tricky. There's no stopping the thinking mind if we start listening to that. It can always think up an argument or a reason or a different point of view. It'll never stop if you stay there and keep talking with that thinking mind. We find that our ego functions best when it's aligned with a larger sense of possibility or an anchor object. Perhaps when you've meditated, you have anchored in your breath, or maybe sometimes a mantra, or an attentiveness, a tuning in to one of our senses. We need that orientation, that inner alignment, that inner staying that anchors us, or that thinking mind will take over. That inner staying anchors us to our values, our principles, our good beyond self. At our core, if we seek it, there is a wholesomeness there, ready and accessible for us at all times. And from there, we source that good in self and that good beyond self. That gives us that higher purpose that our heart can now resonate with. Arriving, availability to this moment, aligning to that good beyond self or that higher purpose. Our principles beyond ego, the place we are inspired. You might call it your North Star. We can align to wisdom, to compassion, to life itself, to love itself, and to our own grounding wholesomeness. Aligning here and now, here, now. Available to this moment. Aligning to our deepest truth and our North Star. That is being attuned and aligned. Whenever you are ready, you can come back and we'll explore this experience and this concept of attuning and aligning it's really our self as instrument. As coaches, our self is our instrument. And so our ability to be present here and now, to be available to the moment, to be aligned, know what we are aligning to as we coach, as we lead, is essential. If anyone wants to share a comment on any experience you had with this, we'll take a moment. It's also a time we could just be quiet for another minute and let it settle in, but let's just hold a space here if anyone wants to share an experience you had with this. Okay. Well, I hope we're all here and now. So let's go. Let's see. We've got half an hour left, right, Bev? Okay. And we want to leave a little time for, yeah, Bev, I'm going to leave it to you to think about if we should do a, small group or paired discussion or leave it.
Yeah, we'll revisit that in about 20.
Okay. So here is the model that I wanted to share with you, which is based on when I was head of education at the Center for Spirituality and Healing. We ran programs and courses that were all about integrative health practices, and a lot of them were culturally based wisdom traditions. We only taught things that had clinical evidence. So it was interesting because we could teach Reiki, for example, as an energy healing practice because there was clinical evidence behind it. We could not teach, oh my gosh, I'm blanking. What is it called? It's widely used in Europe. Anyway, it'll come back. I'm having a moment. But anyway, I really gravitated then and always have to energy practices. And whenever I worked with groups, whenever I work with in coaching, I am very attuned to the energy present in the conversation and the energy field that is being created with the client. So all of the ways that I work with wisdom, and probably most things I work with, have that as part of their grounding. I told Bev the other day when I was showing her this model, this started for me when I Googled one day, wise mind. And the thing that popped up, probably the first 40, um, 40 responses that popped up were all about DBT, which stands for dialectical behavioral therapy. Wise mind was a concept they used because it's one that people can grasp. And it was shaped in the field of psychology, but it was really the intersection between emotional mind and rational mind. And so, what they were trying to teach is a practice for attaining that equanimity we were talking about, that balance, was to understand where you tend to fall on the spectrum of emotionality and reason. We all use both at some level, but you may tend to rely heavily on, your emotions as a guide, and other places, in many workplaces, facts, reasoning, logic is the only acceptable approach. But, they called out that wise mind happens at the intersection when we're able to tap and use all of that to create a more wise response to what is happening in our lives. So on the slide, you see emotional mind as feelings, reactivity, impulses, mood dependent. That sort of feels like it's negative, but it's not. Feelings are a source of information. Rational mind, the source of information, is what's considered fact, which is often debatable these days, especially. Reasoning, logic, it's more our thinking brain, right? And what makes sense. So I always felt, so I had seen that before, and I always felt it was incomplete, but I understand why they used it that way, given what they were working towards. So when I started looking at wisdom and leadership, I thought, where's the body in this? And where's the intuitive mind? Um, how many of you feel like you tap intuition in your coaching practice? Yeah, isn't that interesting? Just about everybody, I think. Most coaches would say yes, they do, because they're not going to get there just by looking at emotional and rational mind. I do have a definition of intuition coming, so hold on that if you're already thinking about that. But there, to me, I bring that in because it brings in the wisdom of the body. We've all heard the language. It's my gut sense or my gut reaction or my gut says to do this. There's also Heart Math and others who explore the fact that our bodies have more than one brain, but the brains do different things. Our gut does have a brain. Our heart actually does have a neural network that could be considered its own brain. So the intuitive mind taps the embodied, the felt sense, the gut reaction, and sometimes pure instinct. So when you combine the three and use them together, the goal, the ideal, is to be in wise mind, that by tapping all of them, you can land in a place that is more centered, that has more clarity because you're bringing in information and balancing it from multiple sources, that has some authenticity because it's honoring the wholeness of who you are. You are not a body, you are not a brain, you are not your feelings, you are all of it together. And it also allows for some of that, wholesome and ethical orientation and feelings like compassion. So this is a model intended to help us look at, as part of developing our wisdom in life and in leadership, our personal field, and how are we integrating or creating coherence among all of these different capacities and resources, many of which AI does not have, but we do. Right? So, how are we doing that? So, that's the start of it. And then we move to, oh, I'm going to give you the intuition. 'Cause I knew someone would want this, but what I have here is a definition of intuition. And again, looking at the literature, it's the ability to perceive patterns and truths beyond our conscious reasoning. It comes through embodied awareness, subtle cues in the field, and sometimes experiential insight. That's what I have. What do you think? Does anyone have a Question, comment, critique. Okay, we'll move on then and finish the model here. The wisdom resonance model starts with the personal field, right? Then we go beyond. This is why Jen made me teary. The relational field, the field of right relationship, the field, the knowing we are part of a relational fabric. Nothing lives or situates alone on this earth. We are in relation. You could also say I'm looking out at my woods. We're in relationship to the trees. We're in relationship to each other right here. We're in relationship to each other's feeling states. We are in a relational fabric, and that is one of the essential substantive truths for me about life itself. So I'm going to add the other field before we start looking at insight and intuition. I mentioned this earlier that this issue around the pro-social aspect of wisdom, we could say that's part of the collective field. There is also a larger collective field. If you read some of, I should put some of Einstein's quotes in here. Many of the great inventors, creators, geniuses who are documented throughout history were in touch with a universal field where there is a greater knowing. And somehow they were able to develop enough personal coherence in that personal field that acts a bit like a tuning fork. I could call it the tuning fork in the center of the model, which allows you to sense into what is outside and beyond yourself with a greater capacity. This is a tricky one to talk about. I was schooled when I was looking into the literature around this. I was working with the three principles, and they used a term, divine. No, oh no, I forgot it now. Is it divine mind? No, universal mind. I don't even know. I just lost it. But they had mind in it. I think it was universal mind. You could say divine mind, you could say spirit, but it can also be contained in a secular expression, like the noetic. If any of you know the Institute for Noetic Sciences, that was created when Edgar Mitchell really launched it. I think he was supposedly the first astronaut who got to see Earth from outer space. And it hit him. There was a knowing beyond knowing, an experience beyond anything he had ever experienced when he saw Earth as just this little planet. And he became aware in a felt way, in an experiential way, of everything that was beyond that. That's a unified field, maybe you'd call it. So you can use whatever language you want, but it's kind of something we can play with in terms of how we generate the insight that leads us to more wise or wisdom informed action. So in my sense of this is that personal field, that's our tuning fork between our emotional, rational, intuitive, and the extent to which we are coherent in that allows us to feel into the relational field more significantly, or we'll call it the universal field. Why are we talking about this? As a coach, that's where we get so much of our information. That's where our clients have breakthrough insights, right? Is when we're going beyond listening to and reflecting words alone. Does anybody have an experience of this they want to share in coaching? Have you had an experience where something just pops up and you don't know where it came from? But it's as you sat in that relational field with your client. Give us some real life examples. This can be fun. Anyone who had a little head nod.
Well, I can give you a very simple one that I often tell other people where I was coaching a person and it was coming time for the client to uh, come to some commitments they wanted to make to action and inquiry before the next session. And I kept getting colors, princess pink and baby grass green. Princess pink, baby. Well, this was like a powerful, like really assertive leader, female leader. And Princess Pink I was having judgment about that, but I thought, ah. And I said, we were talking and I said, "Do you like to write?" "Oh yeah, I love to write." And all these colors. And I finally said, "Listen, I've just got to share this with you because we have this relationship that we've co-created. This is here for you, I assume, but I don't know what to make of it. So I'm getting these colors, Princess Pink and Baby Grass Green." She starts laughing and she said, "Those are the colors of my favorite journal."
Oh my gosh. Amazing. Bev, I just did a time check here. Wow, how time flies. Um, let's just use this as our kind of closing dialogue. And the thing I forgot after we talked yesterday, I did not write down the two questions we were going to put out there. Do you remember them?
Was what I think, what do you already know about tapping your own wise mind in service of your coaching? How do you go about that? What are practices you have, or things that you might try or you know other people try? And then the second one was client facing. Um, what is it that you do to help sometimes help a client be aware they have a wise mind, but also to help them tap into or really embrace their wise mind in service of their good and the greater good they're going for.
Yeah. So essentially, in your coaching practice in your life, what are your experiences in tapping into kind of wise mind yourself, and how do you help your clients do it? Was the intended discussion. So, should we just move to that and do it as a large group, given the time?
I think so.
Let's go ahead and do that. And I'm going to sit back and listen to you guys talk now for a while and just share your experiences with that. So the two things again, and then I'll share some closing slides on that that may be helpful to you. Um, so yeah, tapping your wise mind. How do you tap into the relational field, the universal field to create insight? And how do you help your clients develop that capacity?
And for some of you, you might start out thinking about when you were having trouble tapping into, when something was getting in the way while you were coaching or in a relation dialogue, and what you might have done that helped you kind of regain that congruence. We
And
are
if
kind of hardwired to look at what's going wrong first. So whichever way in.
yeah, or just share an experience you've had with this. Yeah.
And Betsy, it looked like you took yourself off mute.
Yeah, I was just going to share that coach education was so helpful for me in this realm because I think I have very strong intuition, and it's been distracting most of my life and confusing. And I think being able to understand what it is, whether it's me or others, the things that I'm picking up on. And I can remember going through coach training and having, I think it was Stacy who said to me, you really need to be curious about the things that you intuit, and do it in service of your client, which was a radical shift for me. Because she's like, you know things and you say them, and it's sometimes like you have to couch it. And is this useful to you? The consent and that changed my life in all areas, in coaching and in work and in family relationships, of understanding when like I know something, I don't know how I know it. But rather than being invasive and rude, I can use that in service of what might be helpful to them. And then the other question I love that you talked about, like, how do we help clients? I work with a lot of creative people. And my very favorite thing to tap into is the way that they maybe played as a child, where they lost hours. And I think that there's some very deep wisdom and intelligence in how we are in our own temperament from a young age. And that's some of my very favorite and touchstone conversations I've had in client relationships. I like to tell a story about a woman I coached who told me when she was in sixth grade, she built a greenhouse off the back of her family's home. And I was like, not a lot of sixth graders do that. And we had this wonderful conversation about how she came to that and how she made it happen, and then realizing that pattern and that intelligence was in everything she does as a leader. So
Wow.
I love those conversations. And I work with another woman who works in finance, and she's brilliant in finance, but her secret background is as a dancer and a choreographer. And so we talk a lot about the intelligence that moves across different fields, and how she can bring that into her other work. So thank you for these prompts and thank you for this conversation. It's been just wonderful.
Thanks, Betsy. Someone else want to come off mute and share?
I'm happy to share. Michael, can I share? Can I share about our experience, Michael? Yeah. So I had the beautiful experience of actually participating in a museum sage experience with Michael, facilitated by Michael recently, and I mention it on LinkedIn, but not to the depth that I'll talk about it today, which was Michael, we met at the Minneapolis Art Institute. So I think art is a beautiful access point. And I know in my coaching with Cindy, also you used cards before. I think it was like pick a card or give me a number or something like that, which I love this stuff. But in my museum sage experience, I picked numbers and which Michael, through some logic, brought me to a room and a piece of art, and my eyes were closed. And she asked me, without looking, without knowing where I was, to describe what I saw. And I very accurately would, in hindsight, because my friend was recording this, described the painting that I was standing in front of. It wasn't what I saw in my mind, but the words that I used and the colors that I was seeing in my mind very, very closely resembled the piece of art that I was in front of. I know, Carla, right? Nuts. Um, and um, I had shown up in advance with a question. So Michael had encouraged my friend and I who are doing this together to bring a question, which I think to your point, Betsy, created like, what are the boundaries of where we can go with this? But naturally, as a coach, my question's like, what do I want to do with my life? Or like, what do I need to let go of? I can't remember exactly what the prompt was, but it was something big. And as you were talking, Cindy, about wisdom, I have to tell you, all that kept coming up is this painting that I was standing in front of, and this inner knowing that I got through the solicitation of this art of like, you're doing exactly what you're supposed to. Well, there was no grand reveal other than like you were doing exactly what you're supposed to be doing. Keep going. Like there was no friction. And so it was just I am with Michael that I'm like, this museum sage experience keeps coming up because when you prompt me for my wisdom, the tactical side of me likes having a painting that I can point to say there it is. But it was a really neat experience. And so I wanted to share that both like from Michael was like the coach or the sage, or was I the sage? Were you the sage? I don't know. She was magical.
You are the
Um,
sage. The client always is the sage.
okay. Michael was the mastermind behind the whole experience, and it was amazing. But I think of like art or cards or a prompt or Betsy, I love the how did you play as an access point to that inner wisdom, because what Michael was tapping into was my own wisdom about myself. But I really started to trust myself when I could understand and label my wisdom. I like my colors were accurate. What I said it's a lady. The
Mhm.
painting was of a lady. Um, and so it was kind of I'm just wanted to share that as a coaching experience, but also like my own wisdom.
Yeah, thanks, Jennifer. I see Michael Chin, you've got your hand up. You want to come off mute, please?
Yes, first, thanks for the presentation. I think it's very interesting. I think maybe I have a little bit question. Not in fact I have a lot of questions, but I just bring one two. Uh, I think generally the I feel kind of like the human being uh kind of like we saying we look for the wisdom. Uh, but I think the wisdom is not kind of something we can feel it, but we really cannot see it. It's not like kind of material things, it's immaterial, right? So so that's kind of like a little bit tricky things. Um uh that's what I feel is kind of like, when we in the society, and also we try to use our language way, because we generally, in the culture, we want to say, okay, what's the goal? What's the gap? And how we reach goal 1, 2, 3, 4, right? But I think that model things already under our language and also under our thinking. But the question, if we really deeper think about, like, the problem, and we say problem generally, we have some issue with our work, with family issues. I think that's the problem. It really exists, right? So, and then we try to bring the solution. So the solution still is come from, we say we try to meditate ourselves, we try to do our best and to cover all the things. And then we try to use the technique, whatever. And maybe we call it like, some common zone, like 3 areas, like rational, emotional, intuitive, there are some common things we call it wisdom. That is a very good approach. But I just have some feelings, kind of like the problem, the solution, the wisdom, they are the same one. They are the people, They are pe because I think maybe because of our language, our problem, we solving problem, the process, they have what we call it alienation process. That means when we solve the problem already alienated us. So training us to certain position, and then we react that position, and then probably we have like a two problem we need to figure out. One is the real problem. I mean, the things happen. Another is like beings, because our being already impacted by certain things, alienated process. Because whatever your job, your money, your food, your family, you say, I don't have any alienation. Because we are human being, right? So that process there. So the being issues will come out. So that means human being, we need a balance too. One is we need to solve the problem. We need to find the time. We need to find a kind of like, the objective solution to that. But secondly, in the same time, because the timing, they cause our being into different way, up and down. So also we need to solve the being problem. So that's kind of like the balance two things, right? So to make that, uh, uh, yeah, that's what I say. Sometimes I think maybe when we saying we quantify the things in the different layers, but in fact it's not different layers. Um, it's just the same layer. It's kind of like when you one brain, you need to handle your real problem, and at the same time you need to find your solution. At the same time you need to calm you down to being good. So it's not kind of like they really have a clear border, because all linked by ourselves is human being itself. So it's a kind of like a self game.
Yeah, Cindy, do you want to respond to that or
That was a lot.
yeah?
First of all, I will say I totally agree. Language is so challenging, trying to communicate things like this, and something that not only is complex, but is embodied and energetic and taps into, beyond what is known for us. I think, the thing that struck me, and others may have pulled out other things from all of that, um, was the finding solutions piece, because we are so grounded, especially in, most work settings, that that's what we're there to do, is solve problems, find solutions. And that typically takes us right to our rational mind only, and we think that we can think our way into or out of things. And so I kind of glommed onto that, because to me, using a wisdom framework, it's a given that we can't think our way into or out of most complex challenges. But what we can do is look at our entire personal field and be conscious of, how we're holding things emotionally. Are we holding it lightly, how we're holding it rationally. Are we holding it with curiosity in our mind? Intuitively, are we holding it? Are we allowing ourselves to let our bodies, our felt sense, our colors, our images inform? So we're not solving ever, but what we are is holding a space where we are a fairly coherent, attuned field and capable of receiving insight, not receiving solutions, but receiving insight that might lead us toward or allow us to open up or untangle a tight knot that we've been fighting with and just allow it to open up and untangle and be in a place of receiving insight, receiving a way forward. So it's very, to me, it's very energetic, and it's just a whole different way of trying to deal with something that is complex. That's what I got. But again, there was a lot in that. I probably only fully received 20% of it. So does anyone else want to respond?
Well, actually, I'm going to intrude and say that given the time, um, we're going to put a pause on that and just I'm going to say what really hit me, Michael Chin, is the difference between a human being and a human doing. And then the idea that no matter what, we really are all universally connected. And when we can truly be with the fullness of us, the other, and the universe, magic happens. Cindy, what I'd suggest, I did put a little thing in the chat saying we might run over as much as 5, and if folks can stay, that's great. If they can't, totally understand it. We hope to see you in January. But I'd suggest you highlight briefly the 2 slides, and we go to wrapping up.
Okay. Yeah, this is really now we're in the place of application, and there's just so much we could discuss here. I'll just share these quickly and you'll have them in the recording when you get it. So coaching, so what does it mean to coach with a wisdom presence with that alignment, attunement between the emotional, rational, intuitive fields? 4 things that I called out here. One is that to cultivate its practices for creating a field where something wise can arrive. You don't create wisdom, but you can receive it, is my personal take on that. So, what are those practices? Well, cultivating your personal coherence is one of them. Really take a look at what are you relying on, over relying on, under relying on, and allow yourself, if you haven't been letting your intuition play, have an equal voice, start doing it. If you have, if you are not happy with your ability to sustain equanimity, work on that, right? Second one is attuning to the relational field. I think a lot of coaches are magnificent at this, and some have even had training in it as part of their initial coach training. But know that part of the magic of coaching is that you are creating a relational field with your client. And in any relational field, there are things accessible that are not accessible to one of you on your own. Third one, invite alignment to something greater. I don't know how that kind of meditation slash guided imagery sat with you guys, but it was my effort to just acknowledge that if we're not aligning to something as we create, as we live, as we lead, um, we will get off course. We won't be creating and leading with the level of intentionality that is possible. And I think my last slide in here is about, wisdom never happens by accident. It is intentional. And then the last one, hold space for the not yet known to emerge. Enjoy the fun of being in a life, a space, a challenge where we don't actually know yet. And how fun to hold space for that to be and know that we have some tools here that we can play with and invite things to emerge, invite wisdom to be received, insight to arrive. So there's that. I
Well,
don't think
as Cindy is going to briefly show you these slides, I'd like you to be thinking, I'd love for one or two, maybe even three people to hop off mute in, when we end within the next 3 minutes to say something you're taking away. And if you'd prefer to put that in the chat, that's great. But I wanted to give you a heads up. Back
and
to
I
you,
don't
Cindy.
Yeah, and Bev, I'm not going to even read through these because I know we're out of time, but it's been on the screen long enough. If you want it, you can take a little picture. But some self-reflection questions for coaches as you work with this material. And then the last one is some questions to invite wise mind for your clients. So I'll leave that up for a second too, yeah. So these are things that I offer. You will have your own questions. This was just my personal brainstorm here. And the last thing that I did want to leave you with is no one ever becomes wise by chance. Like most things in life, we have to want it and we have to take action towards that. So,
Yeah. And Cindy, could you just back up to the coach questions one more time? And would someone like to come off mute and tell us something you're taking away from today? Could be an inquiry, it could be something you're going to use, an action step you'll take. Jennifer says, be here now. And another, I loved you, Cindy. Thank you for sharing your gifts with us.
I'll come off mute. This was really wonderful. And I love the way you've framed these concepts. I've been doing some presentations lately on abundance and fundraising, and the way that you've approached these concepts has inspired me to revisit some of the ways that I'm sharing learning. So thank you.
Thanks, Betsy. And Michael Nelson says, wisdom goes beyond self. And we will leave it there. I want to thank you, Cindy. It is always, always a joy to hear you and hear what's been percolating in that beautiful pro-social mind of yours. And everyone else, it was lovely to have you with us. If you're watching this recording, we're happy to have you in that form too. And we hope to see you all in January. If you haven't signed up for the CCO regular-ish newsletter, it's pretty regular, once a month. We're never sure when in the month, but regularly it shows up. Or if there's anything else you want to learn about CCO, be in touch with me, Carla Quinn. It's Bev at Center for Coaching and Orgs, Carla at Center for Coaching and Organizations. And anyone who wants to stay on after I stop the recording, feel free. But that's it for today. Thank you. Thanks again, Cindy.
yeah, thanks for
Take
having
good care.